This is everything I hoped it would be and so much more. Oda has outdone himself, and as much as we should welcome back the magnificent Jaguar D-Sol, we should also say that he's not doing a whole lot to beat the allegations of being the man with the burn scars. So this chapter starts with 3 whole pages of Robin flashback, and it's just like, mate, the audacity of this author to take what is one of the most heartbreaking flashbacks in the series and release DLC for it 19 years later. For some context, Robin's flashback was the first flashback that I read weekly when I caught up during any Sobby. This was way back in 2005, and it destroyed me back then as a 16-year-old, and seeing more of it destroys me all over again now as a 35-year-old. Especially the part when we see that Robin has drawn O'Hara onto a map in a book. It's just tragic. Because what else can you do as a child? You don't want the legacy of your entire civilization to be erased, but more than that, I imagine this is part of not wanting to face the reality that you, 8-year-old girl, are now alone. If Robin accepts this book, then that is accepting the fact that O'Hara has been destroyed and she has nothing. So at every possible opportunity, she's trying to make for to reinforce that O'Hara lives on, not just for the world, but for herself. So what Oda does here is he very efficiently packs in as much cruelty as he possibly can in these 3 pages. People think that Eiichiro Oda is a nice man. He isn't, at least not judging by what's happening here. Because another example is Robin eating garbage with a stray dog. And this is very manipulative because it's usually a lot easier to make people feel bad about animals than it is for their fellow humans. We're quite desensitized to human violence and suffering, so putting child Robin next to the stray dog allows Oda to hit us with that more effective gut punch, to take the emotion that people feel for the dog and apply it to Robin. And all of this is before we get to something I never expected to see, which is Robin genuinely contemplating leaving this world of her own volition. I have to say it like that because YouTube age restricts videos that uses the S word, which I recently discovered on one of my Hunter x Hunter videos on New World Review when talking about a character who got involved in a situation where that word may or may not have been applicable. This is such a rough start to a One Piece chapter though. However, I really appreciate it for 2 reasons. The first is because One Piece is at its core a goofy pirate manga, and contrasting that every now and then with incredibly dark and serious moments like this allows those moments to have the impact they should. To think that this character who we love, this character who we always see joking around, was once driven to this point is so powerful, and it adds a lot to Robin's journey. Whenever I reread Water 7 or any Sobby again, Robin's decision to sacrifice herself for the Straw Hats is going to make an unfortunate amount of sense, because she's been seriously considering leaving this world since she was a child, and the point at which that became an easy decision for her to make was as soon as she had people that she wanted to protect, and from her perspective, people who would benefit from her death. And of course, it also makes her saying, "I want to live" hit so much harder, because she's been told that she needs to live by soul, by her mother, by Professor Clover, but never truly known or felt why up until that point. I hate it. I hate it a lot, but I love it. It is really good. And I do unfortunately believe that this was quite necessary for Oda to re-torture us like this, because I'm gonna mention the big number again, but it's been 19 years since Robin's flashback was first published. In that time, people have been born, they've pissed their pants, gone through puberty, done other things to pants, completed high school, and started university with a clean pair of pants. So a whole generation has been born and grown into adulthood since Robin's flashback. And that's a very tricky thing for an author to tackle, because the big event of this chapter, Robin's reunion with Sol, is entirely dependent on being able to empathize with Robin's experience. So in order to do that, Oda needed to reopen those old wounds, so that her pain would be fresh in our minds right before one of the best and most heartwarming things to ever happen in this series happened. And what's happening to you right now is me introducing you to the Calm Belt, which is a channel currently undertaking the project of re-editing the Grand Line Review video library into themed compilations. Very long videos perfect for your very long form activities like driving, drawing, gaming, sleeping, whatever it is you do for extended periods of time, we've got you covered for as long as it takes, with no need to pause what you're doing and pick a new video every 15 minutes or so. They're not just compilations either, because throughout the years there have been what I refer to as lost videos, and these are Grand Line Review projects that were fully written, recorded, and edited. However, for various different reasons, were never published. I'm not going to tell you where they are, how many there are, or even what they are though, because that's not really in the spirit of One Piece, is it? My videos, well, they're yours if you want them. I left everything I own in the link in the description. So if this new long-form channel meets your needs, then please do check it out and make sure to subscribe, because that is insanely important for small channels, and I look forward to seeing you there. But for now, let's get back to you, me. Thanks, me. After Robin's extended flashback, there is a bit of a palate cleansing as we continue to marvel at everything about Elbaf, which at this point has to be the most magical and majestic island we've ever visited and likely ever will visit. We've got ships sailing through clouds, beach paradises naturally forming in trees, and mountains upon mountains of infinite meat. At the moment, this is nothing short of paradise. And we haven't even reached the third level yet where I imagine things get truly heavenly. But because of Oda in that last chapter, thank you, Oda, I can't look at all of this without that small sense of dread building up in the back of my mind. Because in the very last chapter, we were warned by a fictional author not to overstay our welcome on this island. At the moment, that's going to be pretty difficult because this welcome is unparalleled. So I'm just waiting for the dark twist to drop. Like on Dressrosa, which seems like a delicious Spanish paradise until we learned about all of its horrific issues. But something I love is that Road is present for all of this amazing stuff, but he's been crucified, and it appears that he's currently going through the penance phase of minor villains, which is Oda's transitional phase into making them palatable characters again. A really good example of this happening in the past would be Caesar Clown, who did some properly despicable things on Punk Hazard, but then during Dressrosa, Zoe, and Whole Cake Island, he became a literal punching bag. He spent his time in purgatory and then went on to be rehabilitated as a character who we can now laugh at and enjoy. That looks to be the road that Road is roading. He's got some suffering to go through, a lot of suffering, but eventually we'll be able to stand his presence again. But only after laughing at a lot, and I mean a lot of his pain. We've also got Sanji still in Gerd's hands and conjuring hearts towards her, but it's just like, Sanji, mate, what would you even do if Gerd was interested? You'd just be parking your bicycle in an airplane hangar. It's not gonna work. But something very exciting is that we don't waste any time here at all. We get straight into the Big Mom connection, and the Giants have heard about the news of her defeat during the raid, which means that they should recognize Eustace Kid, and I wonder if that complicates matters with him at all, and that perhaps maybe they might have shown Kid some leniency because of it. Like after fishing his prone metal corpse out of the ocean, did they suddenly realize that this is the man who brought down one of their most hated enemies, and as a reward sent him upwards to the astral world, which is the official name for the highest tier of Elbaf? We have the underworld, the sun world, and the astral world. And previously I did wonder about Kid being sent to the underworld, but it would be a fun subversion if they realized who he was and basically gave him a ticket to heaven for bringing down their age-old enemy. And Gerd also mentions that Big Mom was once a friend of hers, and this is very true, because if you go back to Big Mom's flashback in chapter 866, there is this adorable panel of a very young Gerd running away from the 5-year-old Charlotte Linlin, which, like everything on Elbaf so far, really messes with my sense of scale, because here Big Mom is 5 years old, but Gerd is 12, and yet she looks 5. And what I'm not really sure about is how Gerd feels about this whole Big Mom situation. The way Oda draws her does seem quite empathetic towards her old friend, as if Gerd feels really bad about what happened with Linlin and may know that it wasn't, necessarily her fault, but due to the seriousness of the crime committed, she has to abide by the excommunication. But all of this is being put on hold because there is some exceptionally important Robin business that needs to be seen to. And look, this chapter, it might not be the most hype of the year. It didn't come packed with devastating lore drops or crazy introductions, insane action, all of, the One Piecey stuff. But I think this moment is, without exaggeration, one of, if not the best One Piece moment of the year. And I also feel like the stupidest person in the world for not predicting how this was going to go down. When Oda first hit us with the idea that Sol had fallen and wouldn't get up, I foolishly took that seriously, as did the rest of the Straw Hat crew, with Chopper ready to jump in and do some doctoring. But it was as if there was some story need to keep Sol out of the way for now, and that a reunion would be delayed until whatever problem that happens on Elbaf was solved. But what happened instead is infinitely better than that, and it's a direct callback to how Robin and Sol first met in chapter 392, where he tried to scare her after washing up on the beach and failed miserably. And in this chapter, Sol even made sure to position himself in the water on a beach just to perfectly recreate this. Which, by the way, I'm convinced that is the one and only reason why there's a beach on Elbaf. It's because Oda wanted this moment, and so to make it happen, he came up with this really creative but kind of convoluted explanation as to how a beach can exist. But there is so much to love about this. One thing is that at every single point of this reunion, Robin's attitude and mannerisms have stepped back to her 8-year-old self. And we can see this in very simple actions like the way that Robin stands with her hands behind her back, which is absolutely adorable to see Robin's adult self doing. And in general, Robin just feels so youthful and vibrant, much more so than we've ever seen her before. Seeing Sol again has allowed Robin to access a state of happiness and innocence that she hasn't been able to reach for 22 years. And I don't don't want to say that seeing Saul erases all of the pain and suffering over the past 2 decades, but right here in this moment, that pain doesn't exist. What we're seeing here is pure Robin. And there is one point where this almost breaks, which is when Saul mentions all of those horrible, horrible things that they've been saying about Robin. But Robin quickly bottles all of that up because understandably, she just wants to stay in this space. It's not going to last forever. All of her experiences are going to catch up to her again and she'll become the Robin that we know. But for now, just let her have this. And all of the tears that came afterwards definitely got me, and as stated before, that's very much thanks to Oda's opening 3 pages. He really had to crank up the emotional pressure in order to make a release like this land, and my favorite part of this situation is because for the lifespan of One Piece, this has been a very tragic laugh. It's something that Robin did in her darkest times to survive. But after today, the meaning of that laugh has completely changed. It's now a laugh of celebration and warmth and so many other good words. And this whole part of the chapter serves a lot more than just Robin and Saul. It's a celebration of Ohara. It's not just about Robin's suffering, it is about everything that was sacrificed on that day living on. Not literally, I guess except in the case of Saul, but the voices of the past have been heard thanks to Vegapunk, and the legacy of Ohara has now been redrawn back into the history books. But then the line that gets everyone, obviously, is when Robin says, "Praise me for being alive," because that's what she was told to do by everyone around her, Saul, her mother, Clover, which is something that Robin didn't understand why for quite some time. Why do I need to live? Why not just end it all? But Robin did it anyway. And I think it's only fair that Saul at the very least says, "Good job." And even though Oda didn't plan on this arc happening, Elbaf is such an appropriate place for Robin and Saul to see each other, because when speaking to younger Robin, Saul described the giants of Elbaf as, quote, savages, because he's from a different tribe of giants out in the world somewhere, and you wouldn't expect such a soft, emotional scene to be happening on the island of savages on Warland. So there's a very nice juxtaposition here. And look, I didn't know what to expect with a Robin and Saul reunion because this sort of thing, it's just never happened before. Not once in 27 years has a Straw Hat been able to meet their treasured mentor, and to be fair, that's primarily because most of them are dead. But what I felt from Saul and Robin is like a preview of what to expect when Luffy does finally meet Shanks again. These two figures who have gone their separate ways for so long coming back together, and Shanks praising Luffy for keeping his promise of becoming a great pirate. Although at the moment, what I'm looking forward to much more is Luffy's interaction with Saul, because Luffy insists that as the captain, he needs to extend pleasantries to the people who have helped his crewmates. And this is one of the few times where Luffy has acted like a more traditional captain, but it's more than that. This is an act of family, which we saw with Ace when he sought out Shanks in the New World just so that he could thank him for helping Luffy. Ace, as the older brother, felt the responsibility to go all the way to Shanks just to say that, and I think that Luffy definitely feels that same sense of responsibility here with Robin and Saul. And Robin knows Luffy so well because she's surprised that Luffy even remembers her story. And actually, so am I, because this means that Robin actually told everyone this story at some point. During Enisobi, the Robin flashback was portrayed as Robin reminiscing, unlike Nami's flashback, which was told to the crew by Nojiko, even the parts that she wasn't there for somehow. And just on the topic of memory, it's also very well worth noting that Luffy remembered Haruden's name earlier, which is a big deal for many reasons. Firstly, because even if you do remember his name, far too many people in the English fan base still can't pronounce it. I always hear people saying Hajrudin, so just pretend the J isn't there and you'll be fine. But secondly, this shows that Luffy on some level has accepted Haruden. Even though he makes it very clear that he still has no interest in subordinates, it takes a lot for Luffy to remember someone's name. It's a lot rarer than you may think, and he usually just gives people nicknames based on what they look like. So actually learning Haruden's name is a sign of acceptance. But speaking of names, this is another meeting of D's. Luffy probably won't care, or if most, there'll be a tiny piece of curiosity when he discovers that this man is named Jaguar D. Saul. Although whether he cares or not, whenever Luffy meets another member of the D clan, absolutely world-changing chaos follows. The first time this happened was unknowingly so, but it was meeting Nefertari D. Vivi leading to the events of Alabasta, but Luffy meeting Marshall D. Teach and Trafalgar D. Law also resulted in their own respective storms, so I'm incredibly keen to see what sort of storm Monkey D. Luffy cooks up with Jaguar D. Saul. For now though, this was a very chill chapter. Very much the opposite of a storm, and it's quite unusual for Oda to end a chapter in this way. Usually he adds a hook at the end, something to make it impossible for readers to not want to immediately turn the page. And this usually comes in the form of a question that needs answering. Like when Loki was introduced, that naturally brought up a lot of questions about who he is, why he's here, and what he's gonna do. Or in the chapter right after that, which ended with the announcement of Sol's collapse, and the question of what that could mean, as well as the chapter after that, with a quote from Louis Arnault bringing up the question of why we shouldn't overstay our welcome on Elbaf. But this chapter doesn't even dare to ask us that next question. And rightfully so, because it would take so much away from this moment. I've brought up this number a lot in this chapter, but Robin's separation from Sol has almost played out in real world time. It's been 19 years since Robin's flashback was published, and 22 years since those events in World. So we as readers have been waiting for this almost as long as the actual characters have. And I think it was definitely the right decision by Oda not to take attention away from it and just leave the end as a well-earned celebration of survival.